Hello, everybody. It's me, Professor P. This is POSCOM Talks Podcast, Prevention Science, in alliance with FERFA, Families Recovering from Alcoholism and Addiction. Today, I get the honor to speak. I've been asked to speak in hospitals and institutions meeting on Zoom. For those that aren't aware, hospitals and institutions recovery programs, 12-step recovery programs like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, will go into the hospitals, the jails, the psychiatric centers, and we will bring meetings to those residents or those clients that can't get out and get to a meeting. And that's the purpose of hospitals and institutions. I love you. I hope you enjoy. Thank you. I love you all. I really, really do. Brass knuckles, I could just cry. Really, that's how much this program means to me. It's everything. And I'm learning about aging in recovery, how it's an honor and a privilege to get older. Things that I was just clueless about before I came around. My clean date is August 2nd, 2018, and got to experience just a wonderful weekend. We celebrate for a week in Narcotics Anonymous. We try to get to a meeting every day, of course, and pick up a key tag and let it know that the program works. I started coming around Narcotics Anonymous in 2009, so I came in and out of the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous for about 10 years. Not everybody gets to do that. I'm 41 today. I'm a white dude from the East Coast, and that's important. Now, in Narcotics Anonymous, we're diverse, and we are all the same. If you keep coming back and you recover, you find that out. I have found that out. Just try to identify with my story today, because it may not be exactly like yours. Because I know when I was coming in and out for 10 years, I was too white. I partied harder than that person. I was too young, and some of those things kept me out of the rooms. But I always knew I wanted what that old timer had. I mean, no drug compares to the love, the program's everything. So again, Adam, I'm an addict. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. I'll try to be quick with my early childhood. There was a lot of trauma. My mom did the best she could. I love my mother with all my heart. A lot of times, as you'll hear in my story, I don't trash my mom. I used drugs with my mom as a young boy. In Narcotics Anonymous, we have a lot of literature and we have a lot of things that we try to follow. Suggestions or subtle commands is what I've been told suggestions are. One of those is, we try not to talk too much or romanticize drugs. I will say this, our group pamphlet, I'm not going to talk obsessively about drugs, but I'm here in Narcotics Anonymous because of drugs. So, and it is part of my story, and I will mention some drug names, but what I've realized today is that I have a disease and that drugs are just a symptom. So not trashing my mom, I love her, and she did the best that she could, and that early childhood was rough. She was abused, one of her ex-boyfriends kidnapped me, I had my first Zima at 5. A lot of these things that I'm sharing with you now, during those 10 years from 2009 and 2018, I would come in the rooms and those things kept me different. If you've been to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting, and I know we just read that 4th step, I came to realize that there's always somebody there's always a Bruce Willis. There's always someone a little bit harder than me, and maybe someone I'm not that great and I'm not that bad. I'm just part of. And that's what I was trying to find in the using drugs. I was trying to find this unity and conviviality. It wasn't until I came into Narcotics Anonymous that I found that. And so I told you, there was some trauma growing up in Baltimore City. I think I am, it always came that I was tuberculosis positive, but I'm not, because I was born in downtown Baltimore. And so I got a TB vaccine. I mean, when I moved to Harford County, about 20 minutes northeast of the city, I thought squirrels were rats. I love my mother. She didn't get to find recovery. My father had left us, and he started another family, and I got to connect with those half-siblings, Heather and Scotty, who both of them were younger than me, and they both died as a direct result of the disease of addiction while I've been clean. And horrific deaths. They're horrific deaths. My stepfather, who was a good man too, came into our life from ages 6 to about 10 when my mother had met this man who would become my stepfather, and he was a good man. He did the best he could, and he brought some balance into our lives. That's when I first heard of recovery, because he was working the other fellowship. However, he was also on a maintenance program. So he was on methadone maintenance, working in Alcoholics Anonymous program, and no opinion on that. And he was good for us. He wasn't beating my mom. He was the best. I'm grateful today. Like, I have dreams today of him driving me to the Brana campout, to Narcotics Anonymous. Today, I may have some using dreams, but I dream of recovery today too. But he did the best he could in my teenage years. And again, I started using young with my mom. Cigarettes and alcohol were always on the table. This is, middle school. I mean, this is what we did. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't know that Xanax and pain pills were drugs. I had no idea. If I couldn't sleep, my mom would hand me a football, and same with the pain pills. We didn't know. I didn't know. And I don't think she knew either. Our literature, it says we are misinformed. We were misinformed by misinformed people. And I really was. And it's not until, I surrender steps 1, 2, and 3, share my 4th step with my sponsor or a pastor and God, that I start to see that. My mom was misinformed, and my stepfather too, who did the best he could, he was misinformed also. And at around 13 years old, I started smoking pot, doing heavy drugs. And my sister was using a lot of heroin, and she was older. She's about 8 years older than me. Her husband and her moved back into the house, and she was pregnant. And my stepfather was just furious, and he would follow him down to Baltimore City in the morning, and they were stealing stuff from the house, and she was pregnant. Baby that was born was, Sarah was 1 pound, 7 ounces. She could fit in your hand. She was probably 4 months early. She stayed in the hospital for about 3 months. She had to have the IV in her head. This was my family. This is how I was raised. And so, all them other things we used. My stepfather, unbeknownst, we ended up finding out while chasing my sister down, to Baltimore City, he starts using again. Before I know it, it's a progressive disease. It says it's a chronic, progressive, and left untreated fatal disease. And that means it gets worse, or the disease gets better. And even now, with 6 years and 3 days, my disease also is very privy to those 6 years, 3 days clean. It's right here with me. And that's okay. I love that. That's how I learned to love myself. But I must remember, for me, if I decide to make a choice, here I am getting to tell you this story. And it means everything for me to come on and share. Look, I get dressed up. This is my job. It's my job. When I used, it was my job. All I did was use. And so now, surrendering, all I strive to do is recover also. So before I was at a high school, it was, my house was the party house. It was horrific. It was horrific. I was there when my mom took her first hit of crack, all these things. And I don't believe in triggers. I'm an addict. If I think hard enough, like I know Hugs, if he were to sit here and think hard enough. So, it's obsessive and compulsive. I don't crave today. It's not physically in my system. But if I think hard enough, well, sure. And I've always had an imagination like that. And I go back to a lot of my disease thinking, and it tells us in our literature, we don't have to know how we became addicts. We only have to worry about our recovery and to be responsible for our recovery. But I swear to you, I remember my first bag of Cheetos. I do. I remember the first time that I saw boobs. Like, these are things that stayed with me and that I just could never get enough. I could never get enough. And at 16, I got pulled over for the first time. It was prom, and I ended up taking the rap. Of course, I always could get alcohol for everybody. That was just the alcohol guy. So I had a case of beer, and I had to dump out all the beer, and there was some paraphernalia. I took the charges, and so at 16 years old, I had to see I was in juvenile and didn't have to go into jail or anything like that. But I can remember, I would drink bleach. I would drink pickle juice. None of my urinalysis ever came back reliable, because I was using. I always used. I'm a real smart addict. If I told this woman that I use with my parents, well, first off, how am I still going to use? That just wasn't, I didn't have that freedom. to say, hey, we use with my parents. I didn't, because I was unaware. I didn't know. Horrific. At 18, I get to graduate high school, and blessed, I somehow got a job as a gospel disc jockey in Baltimore, Maryland. WBGR, Washington, Baltimore's first gospel radio station, Shades of Gray, aka Triple Play. And so there was always this spiritual, there was always this divine, I've always been taken care of. I've always been taken care of. It was always right there. And so here I am at this gospel radio station. At this point, 18, when I went on the methadone maintenance program at 18, that was, woo, my family, that was what we knew. Yeah, that's what we knew. A mess. On methadone, smoking, you know it. You know what I was doing. And then the other behaviors, stealing, but I'll tell you one thing, being clean today and thinking back and kicking all the maintenance programs, and I feel more today than I ever felt. I'm not saying I want to go back and go through that hell. What I'm saying is I feel more today. There is so many feelings. This program has taught me hundreds of feelings that I was clueless to. In active addiction, I maybe have a handful of them. And most of the time is, what's the next one? Let me put this feeling on top of this feeling. And today there's a freedom that I don't have to do that. 21, I got a second DUI. This time, I wasn't even 21 yet. I'm 20 years old and get arrested. And at this point, my mom's lost her job. Friends are starting to pass away, close friends. I still dream of him, Shiloh. We live next door to each other. He probably just needed a shot of Narcan, and he's gone. And here I am now, 20 years later. It's still a part of my life. Those things, if you've experienced, I know for me, these horrific things we've experienced, they just don't go away. And thank you for that. That's the gift of being alive and being on this journey. I lost the job at the gospel. I was using. I get this DUI. I had dropped out of college. My mom, sold the house. I was right there with her. Moved in a guy out of prison, the whole gauntlet. At this point, my stepfather's emphysema. He ends up dying at like 50 in a diaper because he just couldn't stop using. So we moved. We moved into this, it was a trap house, right? It was a crack house where we moved. And of course, I'm missing probation. One of my stoopers called the cops on myself. So, I spent some time. And I would have thought that I can remember. It wasn't bad. Look, I'm not a prison guy. I'm not a prison guy. Jail, fatten me up a little bit. Oven baked chicken on Sundays. And then I get out, and what do? The same thing. I can remember getting out of jail one time, going back to the crack house where I live, and I'm not going to do it this time. 20 years old. I just turned 21 years old. I'm not going to do it this time. I go back into the room where I'm staying, just a bed, no sheets, a 3-channel television. Lay there all night, and then the party starts, and I'm not going to use. I got 8-9 days. I just did this little bit and got out, and I'm not going to use. And here comes midnight. They bust in through the door, and now I'm off and running. Geographical changes. I had to take myself with me no matter what. That time that the cops that I called myself, I had a court date, and I was in trouble for missing probation, and they were going to give me a year. And I lied right there. I was like, well, what about my job? Judge must have felt sympathy for me, suspended a lot of time, and then I only had to do some weekends. The deal was I was going to go into the military. That was the deal. And so I did. I went into the military, and that was going to be this new start for me. Of course, day 4 in the military, I didn't quit using up into the military. They took me. The military was great. I love the military. I still found ways and means. And then I didn't get stationed far away from home. I get stationed in Newport News. And so I'm able to hopscotch home. I'm about 23, 24 now, and I can just drive 4 hours home, get what I need, and come back. And even though I'm doing this on a monthly basis, I'm so sick. I'm so depressed. I had all these expectations. Well, I thought I was supposed to go to college, and I thought that I was supposed to fall in love. And here I am, 23 years old, and I'm miserable, and I'm dying. is what's happening. And I, of course, get in trouble in the military. And I ended up having to go to the brig 60 days. What a blessing it was. There was a bus accident. I was in a bus accident. Phew. I utilized that. I rationalized, well, now I got this. I can just really use. And I could hear a lot of the guys in the military like, man, this is your meal ticket. And I didn't understand what they were saying. And here I am now, years later, I got spiritual principles in my life. I'm okay today. I'm okay. And the military will cover me if there were some back issues and things like that, if need be. But I don't need to get paid. I don't need to get paid. Luckily, it wasn't a dishonorable discharge. It was an other than 2008 armed forces where it was a zero policy for addiction. So here I am, down here in Virginia. I get in trouble, and the last thing I can do is go back home. I can't go back home. I cannot go back home because I know what's going on. I know what's going on. My mom's in the trap house. My sister's in the trap house. The brother-in-law's there. And then that little girl, Sarah, I can't save her. And they have another child. And my grandparents, who were wonderful role models, I have their wedding rings on. They were together for 60 years. I mean, they were over it. My sister, being 8, 9 years older, had taken everything from them. Everything. And then I come along and they're bailing me out. The last thing I could do was go back home and face my grandfather, because to him, addicts were the lowest of the low. And that's his misinformation. And, they passed away, but I know he's smiling down today. I know he can see today. But let me tell you, in 2008, what am I going to do? I made a decision to stay here. Before getting out of the Navy, I got to go to 30 meetings in 30 days. So there's a program called SARP. It's a substance abuse rehab program on the military base. And that's when I was officially introduced to Narcotics Anonymous. Now, I can remember, I told you my stepfather played with the other fellowship. And then, of course, my sister was always in trouble. So she would get court ordered to Narcotics Anonymous. And I would go. My stepfather, the man, good guy. I mean, he just was a mess. He's that guy selling methadone in the parking lot. Like, that was my family. And that first meeting I walked into, 2008, 2009, I knew. Who is an addict? Most of us, I knew that was what was needed for me. However, at the time, being 25, where my disease was, I don't know why I couldn't just flip the switch. I don't know. I don't know why I needed to go back out. I don't know. Something there. I decided to stay in Norfolk and was lucky to get with a chief. He was also in the program with me, and decided to get with a good chief. And we started a band together, and life was great. And I met my wife, and she's amazing too. And I've been with my wife for 15 years, and, we have 2 kids now. And I was honest with my wife. Like, I told her, I'm like, look, I'm an addict. We didn't understand that the disease progressed. We didn't. I didn't understand that the disease progressed. And so before I knew it, 8 years into my marriage, it's weed. That's what's running me to the darn Virginia Beach Psych Center this time. I had expended everything. I had tried to step off of this and step off of that, and I'm only going to do this, and I'm only going to do that. Marijuana brought me to my knees. I started coming back to meetings in May of 2018. I was still using. At some point, an old timer just said, hey, your clean date's August 2nd. So it was the end of July, something like that was my last use. And I finally did what they said. I could never wrap my brain around the fact you have to put your recovery around your life. I couldn't 90 and 90. Well, I got to work. If I was going to get out of an institution, I got to go to work. I'm here to tell you today, please, if you just go to the meetings, but God is not going to drop you. I mean, yes, lightning strikes, right? And lightning is striking. It's all over the world, lightning striking. But in most of the time, what I have seen is that when I try to do the next right thing and I put my disease first and put my responsibility for my recovery first, I don't got to worry. I don't have a place to live. There's going to be a couch. There's going to be a job. That's what I had to do. And so I did. And 3 meetings a day, 450 meetings in a row, days in a row, the steps, sponsor. And I did. And I worked steps 1, 2, and 3 twice before I did my step 4, and I was able to work the steps to the step working guide. When I shared my 12 step, my first son was born. During that time, my mother died. My sister died 3 months apart, and we believed that my brother-in-law was a direct result of why they died, right? Like the disease has left none of my family alive. None of them. I have to recover. That's what I have to do. I had to change people, places, and things. I know I got 2 minutes, but if I'm driving, I don't need, why do I need to go down that road? I'll take the long way, because that's what recovery is about. Recovery is about taking the long way. It's about putting in the action. If you want a recovery shortcut, go to a step working meeting. That's a recovery loophole right there. You're getting your meeting and you're working a step. But it is hard work, and it's not about the answer you get back. It's not about that. You can't worry because God's in control. It's just about the work. Take the suggestions, get a sponsor, find yourself a meeting. That's what I did. And I did it every day. And so I pray in the morning on my knees. First thing, as soon as I wake up, I've done it for the last 6 years. I pray at the end of the night on my knees. Do you know how many rooms that I've been looking for things on my knees and never even partied in the room? But yet I couldn't get on my knees and pray to God. I promise you, this program is everything. You're worthy. If you're getting this message right now and you're here right now, I'm telling you, there's a reason. There's a reason, and you're allowed to recover. I love you all. Thank you for letting me share. My name's Adam.